What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Really appreciate you joining me today. And before we get started, we've got a lot to go over. We've got transactions, we've got news and notes, we've got observations from practice. So we'll get through all of that. But I just wanted to say a really quick thank you. I've seen the comments, I've seen the likes, I've seen the subscriptions. You guys have been absolutely amazing, and I really appreciate it. It hasn't gone unnoticed. Like I said, hopefully we can get to 10K subscribers soon, but really appreciate the community that has come and enjoyed this and watched this and commented. I wish I could get to more comments every day and respond back a little bit more. Hopefully that's something I can do a little bit more in the future, but I just wanted to say a quick thank you because I really appreciate you, and hopefully this is something that you're enjoying. And if so, again, like, comment, subscribe, and just appreciate everyone that's reached out so far and has enjoyed the show. We're going to keep doing it 365 days a year, so I'm just appreciative that you guys are here and I get to talk about the Packers every single day, and it's been really fun doing so. So thank you for allowing me this platform to do that. All right, enough about that. Let's jump into what we do want to talk about, and that is, of course, the Green Bay Packers, why we're here. And we had a lot of news, notes, and transactions, but let's kick things off with those transactions because I think these are some interesting ones that maybe were, a couple were maybe, able to be seen coming, but some surprises as well. The first one, which was reported by ESPN's Rob Demovsky, is that Cole Van Lanen was traded from the Packers to the Jaguars. So former University of Wisconsin kid, played his high school football right in the Green Bay area. And, as I sort of brought up through the course of OTAs and mini camps, I didn't think Cole Van Lanen, even though he's with the starters during that time period, I wasn't really buying it. He's just a little bit undersized. And listen, this is no disrespect to Van Lanen, who I think has had a really nice OTA and mini camp. I think he's had a really nice training camp. He has developed, in my opinion, from somebody who last year looked like he was probably more of just a practice squad guy into a legitimate 53-man roster player. And to that point, the Jaguars traded a 7th-round pick, not a contingent 7th-round pick, which you see a lot of at this time. A lot of times you'll see a team say, all right, we'll trade you a contingent 7th-round pick if he makes the team, or if he plays at least 4 games, or if he starts a handful of games, those sort of things. There was none of that. This was, we are going to give you a true 7th-round pick for Cole Van Lanen, and that's it. There's no contingencies whatsoever, which leads you to believe that the Jaguars will, in fact, make him a player on their 53-man roster. And he goes to a pretty good spot and will be able to compete over there. So good on him. But I think for the Packers, as you've got David Bakhtiari back and you've got Elgton Jenkins back, and we'll see when those guys are eventually able to play. But I think we started maybe getting some good news on those players. I think the development of Caleb Jones as well potentially made Cole Van Lanen expendable. They've got a couple of rookies in Zach Tom that looks really good. That, even though Sean Ryan has struggled a little bit so far, he's not going anywhere. So you start doing some of that roster math, and it always seemed to me like Cole Van Lanen was probably going to be the guy who was with the ones and twos almost throughout OTAs, mini camps, and training camps entirely, that was just going to be the odd man out. And instead of releasing him and subjecting him to waivers, which clearly he would have been claimed, Green Bay did well and Brian Gutekunst did well to get not only a 7th-round pick, but a non-contingent 7th-round pick. And why that matters, go back to Kadar Hallman. When Brian Gutekunst traded Kadar Hallman to the Houston Texans for a 7th-round pick, that was a non-contingent pick. Kadar Hallman did not make the team. He did not make the team, and they didn't have to get their 7th-round pick back, or Green Bay didn't have to give it back to Houston. They were able to keep it because there was no contingency attached to it. So Brian Gutekunst did very well at the time to get a 7th for Kadar Hallman. I think he did very well here to get a true 7th for Cole Van Lanen as well. And now this is the second year in a row where a player who was on the starting offensive line in OTAs and minicamps, Ben Braden a season ago, Cole Van Lanen this year, does not make the initial 53-man roster. And again, I kind of mentioned this, but if there's one player who I think is the big winner of this trade, I think it's Caleb Jones. I think it's just trending more and more in the direction that he will potentially make the 53-man roster. No guarantees. Rasheed Walker, we'll talk about in a little bit, could still get his name maybe in the conversation. They could go with less offensive linemen if they really feel, like David Bakhtiari and Elgton Jenkins are actually good to go for week 1. So a lot still at play here, but I think on the surface, this looks like a good deal for Green Bay, getting a 7th-round pick for a player that they were probably going to need to cut. And it looks potentially very good for Caleb Jones as well. The next transaction is the Packers released Vernon Scott with a injury designation. And this was a bit of an interesting move because I think there was some thought process that maybe they would keep Vernon Scott on the 53 and then put him on IR the next day so that they could bring him back at some point. And this is disappointing in a variety of ways, right? Going back to last year, in a year where they're all in and where they need as much special teams help as possible, they're holding on to Vernon Scott like grim death. Like, he can't go anywhere. We can't let Vernon Scott go. We can't subject him to waivers. We can't, and under any circumstances allow any other team to claim him, because we've got to keep Vernon Scott on the roster. And they do that, and he doesn't play a single snap a season ago on defense or on special teams. And they bring him back the next year. And to be fair to Green Bay, it looked for a little bit like it might pay off. When Darnell Savage went down, Vernon Scott was the starting safety with the ones, and it looked like he may legitimately be Green Bay's starting safety week 1 with the team. And to be fair, there's a chance that he still would be if he was healthy. There's definitely a chance that they could have gone with, Adrian Amos and Vernon Scott as their starters against Minnesota. And maybe that risk last year of sort of keeping him on the roster would have paid off. But now with the injury, they released him with the injury designation. Remember, if they would have put him on IR, he would have been out for the season anyway. If they would have, they can't put him on PUP or anything like that. So really your two options are putting him on IR or probably releasing him with an injury designation. You could have kept him on the 53, but at this point, they didn't play him last year. They didn't feel comfortable. He's now injured for, a significant period of time in all likelihood. It probably made sense just to go with the guys on the roster that are healthy, whether that be a Tariq Carpenter and Ennis Gaines, clearly Sean Davis, Micah Abernathy, one of those sort of guys, to just go with somebody that's healthy. I think that's probably the decision here. But multiple levels of disappointing for Green Bay's sake that they held on to this guy hoping that he was going to develop, and he sort of looked like he was getting there, but then has the injury. Feel bad for Vernon Davis, who was having a nice camp, and now the injury sets him back. So just a tough break all the way around. Speaking of which, the other release with an injury designation was to wide receiver Danny Davis. Now, Davis was going to be extremely hard-pressed to make the 53-man roster. He was going to have to ball out in all 3 preseason games to a ridiculous extent because, as we've been talking about, even without Danny Davis, Green Bay has 8 wide receivers that are fighting potentially for roster spots, right? Like, in that they may keep all 8. That's how ridiculous this, wide receiver conundrum is. But it did very much seem like Danny Davis would be an ideal practice squad player. And I thought he was a lead pipe lock for the practice squad. And I still think that clearly would have been the case had he not gotten injured. Instead, now they have to subject him to waivers. He will go on IR. They will release him with an injury settlement at some point, and then he'll be free to sign. And unfortunately, it likely means that he'll end up with another team on their practice squad. But maybe Green Bay can get him back in some capacity. But disappointing for a guy who looked really good in that first preseason game and had a fantastic training camp, OTA minicamp, rookie minicamp, etc. To just lose him for nothing, a bit of a bummer. And hopefully, again, something works out where they can maybe get him back down the line on the practice squad. But as for now, he is off he's subjected to waivers. He'll be back on the team on injured reserve, and then he will likely get an injury settlement from there. But we will see. There's always the possibility with Danny Davis that they release him via waivers. Nobody claims him. He goes on IR by default, and maybe the injury is more serious than we thought, and maybe he just stays on IR all year, and they keep him around and pay him so that next year they can bring him back and be on the roster to start next season. There's always a slight possibility that could happen, but we'll just have to kind of wait and see how that plays out. And then the final move was Kylan Hill. He gets placed on the reserve PUP list. So at this point, you can place players on the in-season PUP list, which is what they did with Kylan Hill. Noteworthy here that they did not do that on Mason Crosby. More on that in just a moment. But Kylan Hill gets placed on the reserve PUP, which means he will miss the first 4 games of the regular season at minimum. And then after those first 4 games, Green Bay can sort of reevaluate and see where they're at. If you've been following along, that's why I legitimately think there's a chance that, all right, maybe you just go with 2 running backs, bring, Tyler Goodson up for 2 games, bring Patrick Taylor up for 2 games, and then bring Kylan Hill back potentially from the PUP list after those 4 games. That's a direction they could potentially go in, but we'll have to just sort of wait and see. But as of now, we know that Kylan Hill will not take up one of those 53-man roster spots, and he will be on the PUP list to start the season. How those things affect the 53-man roster potentially. We talked about Cole Van Lanen, that could be a good thing for Caleb Jones. Vernon Scott opens up some, a roster spot for potentially some of those other safeties, Innis Gaines, Micah Abernathy, etc. Danny Davis opens up an additional practice squad spot, so that could be a good news for an Ishmael Hyman potentially. We'll have to wait and see there. And then Kylan Hill, that means that there is in fact going to be a number 3 running back job open, whether that's on the active 53 or off the active 53. We'll have to wait and see as well, but they are going to need a number 3 running back to start the season in some capacity. The other thing that I think is worth noting here, they have now released multiple players with injury designations, right? The one player they have not done that with has been Dallin Leavitt, even though Matt LaFleur has made mention of the fact that he was probably going to be out. It was a quote unquote significant injury, so probably going to be out a while. What that tells me, almost for certain, and nothing's ever for certain in this business, and there will be a million different turns that things can go in, but what it tells me is that they are going to keep him on the 53-man roster to start on the initial 53, and then on the next day, place him on IR as a player who could be brought back theoretically later in the season, probably to help the special teams out. And then they will add another player that they either released or a different player from another team that was released the next day. And when they have that open roster spot with Leavitt going on IR, that would be my guess. There just doesn't seem to be really any other reason to keep him along at this point when they've been releasing everyone else that's sort of been injured. So that would be my guess. But again, we'll have to sort of wait and see what happens with that as well. Other news and notes. Matt LaFleur made mention that he will not play his starters on Thursday. So Rasul Douglas yesterday was wrong. Matt LaFleur said he will not play the starters, save for the starters that have already played, right? So John Runyan Jr., Josh Myers, some of the younger guys, Romeo Dobbs, anyone that's already played will continue to play. And the one player who could potentially get added to that list of players is Christian Watson. He said if Watson's available to play, he would play. Any young player that's available would play in this game, and that included Christian Watson. So it seems to me he will. He dressed last week, and then when they went through walkthroughs at the end of this practice, the player warming up with the offense against the scout team was Christian Watson. So again, we'll have to wait and see exactly what happens with that. But I know I've said wait and see a lot on this episode, but we're just going to have to on a lot of these different things. But I think there's a very good chance that Watson plays on Thursday. Maybe they don't want to subject him to injury either. And I know there's been a lot of conversations here as to what Green Bay should do. Should they play their players? Should they not play their players? There's no perfect answer here. And there's no right or wrong, in my opinion, because if you go out and you don't play your guys and then you get blown out again in week 1, Matt LaFleur will be criticized. If he plays his guys and a Jair Alexander or Rashawn Gary and Aaron Rodgers, somebody goes out with a torn ACL, Matt LaFleur will be criticized. There's no perfect way to go about this. And the only thing you can do is hope that if you do play your guys, hope and pray that nobody gets hurt. And if you don't play your guys, hope and pray that your team looks good week 1 and that you don't have a complete, crapping the bed situation like they did against the Saints a season ago. Here's where I come down on it. In this game against the Kansas City Chiefs, in week 3 of the preseason, you cannot win or lose anything. Nothing that happens with the outcome of that game will affect anything that you do in the regular season or anything in the Super Bowl. It just won't. You cannot lose the Super Bowl in week 3 of preseason unless Aaron Rodgers, Jair Alexander, Rashawn Gary, I'm sure a handful of others potentially as well, go out with a torn ACL and are out the rest of the season. You lose Aaron Rodgers to a torn ACL in a meaningless game, you lost the Super Bowl in a preseason game. You lose Jair Alexander, Rashawn Gary in a meaningless preseason game, very likely you probably lost the Super Bowl in week 3 of the preseason. Why risk that? I don't care if they crap the bed against the Vikings in week 1. And maybe that seems odd or weird because it's the Vikings and we hate the Vikings. And maybe it seems weird because it's a divisional game and those matter more than any other game. And you never want to lose an NFC North game. You never want to lose an NFC game. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The Packers are going to win the NFC North, barring something catastrophic happening. They're going to be a playoff team, even if they don't win the North. Even if Minnesota wins the North and the Packers get the 6th or 7th or 5th seed, whatever, they're going to be in the playoffs. And I just don't care anymore if they're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. They're going to be there, and they need to play their best football in January and February. And they cannot do that if they lose a key player to a torn ACL in week 3 of preseason. So while I would like to see some of those guys maybe get some reps, I'm with Matt LaFleur on this one. This is what I would do as well. I would not play guys in a preseason game. And even if you get blown out by the Vikings week 1, the Packers will be just fine. Heck, I think there's a chance that they could lose to the Vikings and the Buccaneers early in the season and start 1-2. And I would not be one iota concerned, not one bit. They'll be just fine as the season goes along. They're going to win a ton of games. Hopefully they get hot at the right time, and in January and February is when they're ultimately at their best and playing playoff caliber football, something they have not done over the last 3 years despite winning 13 games in their last 3 seasons. All right, enough about that. Here were the practice notes from Tuesday. We had 3 players that were new to the did not practice list. 1 player who came back, which was Mercedes Lewis, who was just on a veteran rest day. The 3 players who did not practice, Sal Cannella, Rico Gafford, and David Bakhtiari. But don't panic. David Bakhtiari, as noted by the Packers PR staff, this was expected all along. This is not a setback. This is not a new injury. This is not anything. This was the plan all along for Bakhtiari, according to the Green Bay Packers, and there is no issue whatsoever. Bakhtiari was still walking around practice throughout the course of the day, so it doesn't seem like there's any level of concern here. Would it have been great if he could have got back-to-back days of practice and had no issues? Sure. But I love the fact that they have a plan. They're sticking to it. And I'm sure Bakhtiari will be back at practice sooner rather than later. And if you're believing the Packers, which I certainly do, there is no need for concern or worry here whatsoever. It was just a rest day for Bakhtiari after practicing on back-to-back days. And I think if we're all being honest, we probably all could have predicted that going into the day, that it probably after going back-to-back days, he probably wasn't going to do 3 in a row. I think that's a smart move with a player the caliber of David Bakhtiari as they ease him back into this entire practicing mode that he hasn't had as of late. So I think that makes a ton of sense. Your full did not practice list was Sal Cannella, David Bakhtiari, Rico Gafford, Dallin Levitt, Darnell Savage, Akil Byers, Kylan Hill, and Mason Crosby. Speaking of Mason Crosby, will he be back for week 1 of the regular season? Well, if you ask Mason Crosby, his idea is yes. It sounds like he is very confident based on a post-practice interview that he is going to be ready and set to go for week 1 of the regular season, which would be phenomenal news. You would love him to get back a little bit sooner so he can get a little bit more reps with Coco and O'Donnell, etc. But as of now, it sounds like Crosby's confident that he will be back for week 1. In the meantime, the new kicker, Ramiz Ahmed, has been fantastic, and he continued to make field goals on Tuesday. But I think we all want to see Mason Crosby back, and that is good news from the mouth of Mason Crosby. I think the big takeaway from the day, from Tuesday's practice, is we got a new defensive alignment in the defensive backfield, and that included Rasul Douglas playing safety alongside Adrian Amos. And I think that's a really fun idea, and I'm very excited about it. And I think it's just really interesting, right? So we talk all the time, or Matt LaFleur talks all the time about best 5 offensive linemen, best 5 guys. We're going to get the best 5 guys out there, right? And I think it's offensive linemen that gets the publicity more often than not, but he said very similar thing last year in the defensive backfield when Jair Alexander came back, and they had Stokes and they had Alexander, and they wanted to get Kevin King in the game for whatever reason, and they had Douglas and they had Amos and they had Savage, and we're going to get our best guys out there. And they found a way to get Kevin King in the slot so that Douglas and Stokes could play outside, and then Jair played a little bit in the slot, and they moved guys around to get their best guys out there. And this feels to me like a very similar situation. So the question here would be, would you rather have Rasul at corner and Sean Douglas at safety, or Rasul at safety and Keyshawn Nixon at corner? So long story short, is Keyshawn Nixon at corner better than Sean Davis is at safety? And clearly Green Bay thinks that there's at least something to this, right? And Keyshawn Nixon's had a very good camp, and you can see why Green Bay maybe wants to experiment with this a little bit. So in the alignment in base defense, Eric Stokes and Jair Alexander on the outside with Amos and Douglas at safety. Same thing in nickel, just with those 4, and then Keyshawn Nixon in the slot in nickel defense. So I like the idea, and I think there could be a couple different ways that they go about this, right? I think if you're playing maybe more of a running team, maybe you put Douglas in the slot and you add another safety out in the field like Sean Davis or whomever else that they want to put out there. Clearly, if it's Savage and Amos, great. If Savage is still out and they're playing more of a passing team, maybe you want to get more cover skills out there, which isn't Sean Davis's, best skill set. So you put Douglas at safety, Nixon at corner. Now you've got more players out on the field that can go cover. And more often than not, in today's NFL, the more cover guys that you can have out there, the better, right? So I think it's going to be situational in how they use that. Listen, Rasul Douglas has been compared to Charles Woodson by Aaron Rodgers twice now. And I think we can all be a little bit honest that Aaron Rodgers, prospect evaluation and player evaluations have been a little bit lacking at times. But you can see the ball skills with Rasul Douglas. You can see the tackling ability. He's a good cover corner. He's got great instincts. Those are the traits of a good safety. So I love the idea that they're trying it out. How long this lasts will remain to be seen. We'll have to see if they continue to do this in more practices and certainly in week 1 against the Vikings. But it's another option for Joe Barry to play with. And you always want to get your best guys out in the field. And I could see a real situation where Nixon at corner and Douglas at safety is better than Douglas at corner and Sean Davis at safety. And it's as simple as that, getting your best 5 guys out there, whether that's offensive line or defensive backfield. We have seen Green Bay have that philosophy more often than not. And I am a big agreeer with that philosophy. Let's put it that way. So that was the biggest takeaway of the day. Your starting offensive line remained Yosh Nijman, John Runyon Jr., Josh Myers, Jake Hansen, and Royce Newman. The second team offensive line with no Cole Van Lanen was Caleb Jones at left tackle, Zach Tom at left guard, Mikal Manet at center, Sean Ryan at right guard, and Rasheed Walker at right tackle. Really great to see Rasheed Walker get some team reps. He has not done much with team. I would love to see him play against the Chiefs in the preseason so they can get an evaluation. He was a 7th round pick that a lot of people thought was like one of the steals of the draft, getting him in the 7th round, and we just haven't been able to see anything out of him. So if all of a sudden he could go out and just have a phenomenal game against the Chiefs in this final preseason game, maybe that gives Green Bay a little bit more pause and says, hey, maybe we don't want to subject this guy to waivers. If he can't play or if he has a really bad game, then yeah, you're probably going to have to release him and subject him to waivers and hope like heck nobody claims him and you can get him back on the practice squad. But either way, it was really nice to see Rasheed Walker back out there and practicing with the team. It just hasn't been something we've seen a lot of so far in camp and in preseason. Player of the day, believe it or not, I'm not telling you stories. It was Tyler Davis, who was desperately in need of a big day. He had a very big day. Caught a beautiful seam ball over the middle of the field by Jordan Love. I want to say it was actually Douglas on coverage on the play, but I could be transposing a couple plays. But either way, he gets up the seam in the middle of the defense. Actually, it might have been Tree Carpenter. Either way, doesn't matter. Tyler Davis streamed up the middle of the field. He had just enough separation on the play. Love placed it perfectly in stride, the exact place that you want the ball. And we're seeing more and more out of that from Jordan Love, which you love to see. But caught it in stride, was able to get downfield. And this is the receiving ability and hands that you just don't see from any Packers tight ends on this roster. This is a little bit more Robert Tonyan-esque is what I see from Tyler Davis. Now, clearly he needs to be much more consistent. He hasn't been in camp or preseason so far, but that was a very nice play from him. Then in red zone periods, Aaron Rodgers hits him beautifully on a skinny post in the end zone, beat Rasul Douglas. Aaron Rodgers did a little no-look pass on the play. Beautiful ball, beautiful catch, great touchdown by Davis on that play. And then later in 2-minute drill, Jordan Love buys a little bit of time and finds a sliding Tyler Davis in the end zone. So 2 touchdown catches, big play over the middle of the field. That is exactly what the doctor ordered for Tyler Davis. He needed that in a big way, and hopefully this gives him a great deal of confidence moving forward. He can move past the mistakes and start playing the brand of football that we know he's capable of playing. Speaking of Aaron Rodgers' no-look passes, there was a play where he's about to scramble around, the defense is converging on him, and he's looking this way and does a no-look flick this way to a leaping Romeo Doubs who caught it, or just caught the ball, I think, out of the corner of his eyes last second, because just like the defense wasn't expecting the no-look pass, I don't think Doubs was totally expecting it either. He leaps up at the last moment, does almost like a Tyree or a David Tyree catch off his helmet, and then comes down with the ball somehow. All of this was for a 6, 7, 8-yard gain maybe, but there was a lot of fun and wizardry involved in the play. The no-look pass, the scramble, the buying time, the crazy catch, coming down with the ball. It was a very, very fancy 6, 7, 8-yard pickup at best, but either way, a very fun play nonetheless. That, however, was not the play of the day. The play of the day belonged to KB and Ento. Jordan Love is rolling right in red zone period, buys time, rolls right, and streaking in the back of the end zone is Samori Toure. And I see Toure in the back of the end zone. And I'm like, oh, he's got him. And he's going to be able to put that ball right up over the top of the defense, right in the back of the end zone. And Toure is going to have another touchdown, which he's been just a touchdown machine as of late. Except KB and Ento said, I don't think so. When I say KB and Ento had a leaping interception, that does not do this justice. KB and Ento got up, like serious up on this play. And even then goes up one-handed, picks the ball out of midair, comes down with it with ease, and gets the interception in the end zone. Unbelievable play by KB Neto. He struggles with tackling at times. He struggles with pure coverage skills at times. But my goodness, if that guy doesn't have ball skills for days, he comes up with like one or two crazy interceptions in just about every single training camp. And that was his big stamp of on this training camp with, I think, arguably one of the best plays of camp that I've seen so far. But he got serious up, picked it off with one hand. Beautiful, beautiful play. I think Jordan Love and Samori Toure were a bit in disbelief, but that was a heck of a play by KB Neto. Another player who almost had a huge pick six, but couldn't come up with the ball, was Aaron Rodgers. Yes, you heard me correctly. Aaron Rodgers was in slot. They went into walkthroughs, and it was scout team defense, and Aaron Rodgers was playing scout team defense, and Jordan Love is rolling to his right a little bit. Now, when I say scout team and walkthrough does not do this justice. These guys are just like barely going through the motions in these situations. It's just like a little slight jog at best, and you're just kind of like playing toss and doesn't mean anything. So before you jump all over Jordan Love and be like, Jordan Love's throwing picks to quarterbacks playing slot corner, Jordan Love did nothing wrong on this play at all. This is just like an easy toss. And by the way, this might come as a shock to you. Aaron Rodgers just a little bit competitive. He in slot corner may have been going a little bit faster than everyone else playing scout team offense and defense on that play. And he undercuts a ball, hits him right in the hands. He had the opportunity to take it for 6 in a jokingly way, but he let it hit his hands, drop to the ground. Unacceptable performance by Aaron Rodgers. He also gave up multiple completions as a scout team defender. You could tell Danny Etling and Jordan Love were going right after him all day long, and he gave up plenty of completions, had the opportunity to make up for it, hit his hands, dropped it. Unacceptable. Maybe he'll have a little bit more accident forgiveness when a receiver drops a ball now, I guess, or something. But it was fun to see him out there. He and Cobb and Lazard and Tunyon were having as much fun as possible as it could be playing scout team defense and just going out and kind of going through the motions a little bit. So it was fun to watch Aaron Rodgers line up at slot corner and get in guys' faces, though. Last but not least, really cool moment at the end of practice. Matt LaFleur calls in Larry McCarron, gives a huge speech about Larry McCarron. It is on Packers Twitter right now. It's probably on Packers.com as well. There's a couple great pieces that are cut out because I think LaFleur used a little bit of colorful language, but worth watching nonetheless. One of those, as you're there live and you hear Matt LaFleur talking about Larry McCarron, one of those real goosebump moments on the sidelines, and you can catch the majority of it. Again, I know it's on the Packers Twitter page. But just a really cool moment. His 50th training camp for Larry McCarron, either in broadcasting as part of the Packers.com or, of course, as part of the Packers itself when he was playing. What an unbelievable accomplishment. They gave him a commemorative ball. He got to break down the huddle at the end of practice and give a speech. Just a really, really cool moment, and definitely check that out if you have a chance. Definitely worth your time. If you're a Packer fan and you're going to get geeked up over those type of moments, it's more than worth it. So definitely go ahead and check that out. That is going to do it for me today. I always appreciate you. I'll be right back here tomorrow with a episode previewing Packers and Chiefs. I can't believe it is going to be Thursday already in preseason football, so we'll have that covered for you. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.